Welcome to Gods and Movie Makers, otherwise known as Podcasters on the Naga Saga, the show about how religion and the Bible shape the stories we tell on screen. I'm Joe Scales.
And I'm Katie Turner.
On this season, The Chosen One. Why were they chosen? Do they want to be chosen? And why be so attracted to these sorts of stories? We're joined today by Piyawit Moonkham to talk about Raya and the Last Dragon. Piyawit is a PhD candidate, ABD, in Archaeological Anthropology at Washington State University. His research focuses on human use of social space, built environment, and natural landscape through a diachronic investigation of spatial patterns of historical monuments, myths, and local folklores in northern Thailand and mainland Southeast Asia. His article, Ethno-Historical Archaeology and the Mythscape of the Naga in the Chiang San Basin, Thailand, was published last year in Trans-Regional and National Studies of Southeast Asia. Welcome, Piyawit.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We're going to ask just a question to kick off. If you were going to host a meal to bring people together, what food would you make?
I was just recently talking to my friend because they're going to have a Thanksgiving dinner soon, and then I'm thinking to cooking curry because everybody want my curries, even though sometimes my curry is not that great. But I mean, I'm cooking curry all the time. Yeah, I would say chicken curry with bamboo shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Nice.
Is your curry more heat based or more like coconut milk based? Or is it a really nice blending of the two?
I think it's a nice blending of the two. So I tend to use coconut milk, and then I tend to use a lot of curry paste, and then then put everything in there and then eat with rice. Yes. So that is my meal.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, always a winner.
That's a good choice. I like a good curry.
But they also have other types of food as well. But I've been living in America for a long time, so curry is the really easy way to cook because you have a curry paste. It's easy to find from the store, and then when you miss your home, and then or even miss my mom, so just cook curry and then talk to her on the phone, something like that.
So if you were back in Thailand and you had access to all of the foods that you would want, would you go to the same dish or would you do something different?
In Thailand, the way that we eat every day is quite different because in America, you need to go to grocery stores and then you keep it, you store it and then you cook it for a meal, something like that. But in Thailand, they have vendors, and then food is available 24/7, so it's just go and buy food. And my mom sometimes she doesn't want to cook, so she just go and buy some food from vendors or the market, and then come back and then eat. So maybe sometimes they have some other kind of curry without coconut milk, or they have some stir fry, or even if we don't want to go anywhere, so we cook just easy stir fry with eggs, something like that.
We're here to talk about Raya and the Last Dragon. So, before we get into our discussion, over to Katie to give a synopsis of the film.
What? Why are you looking at me like that?
Nothing. I'm just not used to seeing dragons.
Impressed, huh? Oh, wait till you see my backstroke. I'm a wicked when I hit that liquid. I got water skills that kill. I slaughter when I hit the water. I'm really good at swimming. Through rhyme.
Raya and the Last Dragon is a 2021 Disney animated fantasy action adventure film directed by Don Hall and Carlos Lopez Estrada. The film, which is inspired by Southeast Asian cultures, is centered on a warrior princess protagonist named Raya, voiced by Kelly Marie Tran. Raya is on a quest to find a fabled dragon named Sisu in the hopes that Sisu can help banish evil spirits known as the Droon from the land of Kumandra. 500 years previously, the peaceful and prosperous subcontinent of Kumandra had been ravaged by the Droon, mindless spirits that turn every living thing in their path to stone. Sisu, the last surviving dragon, is given her siblings' magic in the form of a gem, which she then uses to banish the Droon before disappearing herself. A power struggle for the gem divides Kumandra's people into 5 separate kingdoms called Fang, Heart, Spine, Talon, and Tail. corresponding to their placement along a gigantic dragon-shaped river. The struggle for the gem eventually leads to breaking the gem, and the Druun come back. Many people are turned to stone again, including Raya's father. Raya is helped on her quest to restore Kumandra by representatives from each region. And the story is ultimately one about trust and unity.
We kind of want to talk about some more general things before we get into some of the things that come out of the film and talk a little bit about some of your research. But first, I was really interested in the language we use, or the terminology we use, to talk about beliefs in dragons, and particularly for your work in Naga. So I want to really get into this. And is belief or religion or folklore or myth, how should we talk about these representations of these figures, creatures in Southeast Asia more generally, maybe specifically Thailand?
Oh, I would start with the ideas of the Naga, at least to my knowledge. So it's kind of drive or like being practiced by the community before the Buddhism was introduced to the regions. So mostly like tied to the belief of like spirituality, like people believe in ghosts and spirits that, or even like ancestral spirits that been practiced there for a long time before Buddhists even arrived. After Buddhism was introduced to the regions, plus Hinduism as well. So they kind of combine or like interact with one another, and then the belief of the Naga itself is transformed into or become a part of Buddhist doctrine, or even like Buddhist characters, and even like become like a major characters to help the Buddha along the way when he's tried to learn about the Dharma, and then also like before he reached enlightenment, and then after he reached enlightenment. And so that is the basic that I would say about the Naga or even the dragon.
Mm-hmm. Is there a distinction between Naga and dragons? How are they different? How are they similar?
I think it's just terminology, because like English, for example, if you talk about Naga, people don't know what that is. So that's why like dragon, because I think the ideas come from like the creatures that in a Western perception of the dragon have the wings and fly. And then also like the part of the dragon also thrive in East Asia, in Chinese cultures, Korean cultures, and Japanese culture as well. So that kind of dragon is quite resemble to the Western perception of the dragon. The form of the Naga here is quite different if we're talking about in the Raya. So Raya have like legs and can fly, but Naga in Southeast Asia most of the time doesn't have any legs, so it's just like basically like a serpent. They also can fly, and then they can go everywhere, even like in underground, or even in the river, or even in the ocean.
But it's without wings. Like when we think of a flying dragon in Western myth, we think of a creature that has wings, and the Naga don't.
No, usually no.
And Sisu and the other dragons in Raya and the Last Dragon, they don't have wings either, even though they can move through the air.
Yeah, but they have feet.
But they have legs. Yeah. They also have a lot of fur and hair.
Yeah,
they have big manes in the movie.
I think it's kind of like they want at least to make it look like a East Asian dragon a little bit, because they have hair on the head. But for the Naga in Southeast Asia, we don't have that, because mostly the serpent. The Naga is decorative and everything, or they can have multiple heads or something like it. It depends on the rank of the Naga. If you read the Tripitaka or the Buddhist doctrine that they're talking about this creature in particular. So it's quite different, but it's still, the ability that can fly or ability that can go anywhere or underground, it's similar.
And in terms of the Naga, are there multiple ones? Are there specific Naga for particular places? How do they interact with the landscape?
So the Naga in Southeast Asian culture is multiple beings, so it's not just one. It's like people. It's like us. They may have parents, they may have grandparents, they may have the leader of the groups or something like that. So it depends on the place and depends on the community or cultures that they perceive. This kind of story, learning from the landscape that they lived in. Like for my case in Chingshan, they have one prominent Naga that came and then helped the king, and it's according to like local folklore. So they help the king create or build the city, and then later, if one king is kind of offended the Naga, so they can destroy the city as well. So this one particular Naga, it's mentioned multiple times in local folklores around Chingshan. And then also like everybody has their own version of the Naga, but also like their version or their narrative or their stories still linked to this particular prominent Naga.
So in the movie, when we see Sisu actually has siblings, and she references her siblings a bunch of times, and they each have different strengths or different powers. But then at the end of the movie, we see there's so many more dragons than just Sisu and her family.
Yep.
So that seems like that actually maps on quite well to what you're talking about, how the Naga actually function.
Yeah, it's the whole family.
So you've mentioned this specific Naga in particular both blesses a city or a king and then is also responsible for its destruction. So this is another element I find really fascinating about them, is that they both seem to be powerful and they can bring good and bad. Are there specific things that they can do or they're responsible for, or it varies?
Oh, it depends. I mean, mostly like Naga is perceived as kind of the wise and then also a righteous creature or mythical creature. So there's a story around Chingshan or northern Thailand, especially in my area of research, that for the children, like, oh, don't do anything bad or don't offend anybody, try to be a good person because the Naga will watching you. If you do good, so they will bless you and then protect you, and you do something bad, so they will, punish you, something like that. So it's kind of like play a role as, the story like Santa Claus in the Western culture. But also in community itself, the ideas for the Nagas play a significant role as well. Like when people do something with the farmland or the landscape itself, like physical landscape, like to build a house, to build a temple, they need to ask the permission from the Naga first before they build it. Or even like going to plant the rice, the paddy field, or to harvest something, or you need to ask the permission or something like that.
How do they go about that? So is there a specific way? Do you have to go somewhere or do something to ask the Naga permission to build or construct?
In my area of research, so they have a manuscript for the people we call like the religious leader or technician in Thai. So they have like a kind of whole handbook for people who specialize on this ritual. For example, they need to consult the handbook before putting the first post to build a house. I don't remember exact details. So like, for example, if the Naga like lying on their back or lying on their side and their head like toward the west, the certain posts need to put in a certain location, like maybe on the northeast or something like that, to kind of like nurture or blessing of the new house that's about to be constructed for that people.
So there's a scene early on in the movie where Raya has been trying to find Sisu because there's this idea that Sisu is the last remaining dragon and she's just hidden somewhere. And so she's going to different places all along the map. And she's at the last place that it could possibly be. And when she gets there, she gets down on her knees and she engages in what I guess the right words would be, some sort of prayer with ritual behavior. And I was wondering if that was similar to what you're talking about here with the way that people actually engage with the Naga.
Yep. Like for the house construction, people will gather and then spiritual leader or religious leader will put some kind of temporary altar, and then they put some food, and then they do prayer a little bit and chanting in either Pali or Sanskrit or even like in northern Thai. And then after that, they can start to construct the house. And at the same time, also like they have other rituals. For example, they have some certain rituals that they do at the river, and then, ask or play something to help them or ask them for blessing, similar to like in Raya. Recently, they have a Naga ritual, like worshipping. So it's become popular in Southeast Asia too, because they have so many local stories. So people tend to like talk about it more.
You talked a little bit about domestic rituals, but I was also wondering if those same things bear out to build temples or any other kind of architecture, or are they slightly different? Is it the same thing with consulting or asking the permission of the Naga?
For the construction, one temple. I was talking with the abbot. The new hall were just built at that time, and then they have two Naga over here, and I asked him why you built the hall. Like the hall is like when the people do their worshipping or like offer food for the monk or something like that. So why that particular building was there? And then he told me that the head of villages had a dream about two Nagas that live under the hall right now. So that's why like they want him to build the hall over there. A sign, even through their dreams, or even like a sign that they found throughout the landscape, they will perceive as a Naga blessing, and they will follow that advice and then construct the building.
I think that's really helpful. It's like this wider picture of the significance for constructing the built environment. In this article, Ethno-Historical Archaeology, you've identified these 4 types of connections between the Naga myth and landscape. And I think a lot of these really seem to bear out very similar processes to how the dragons interact with the landscape or are represented in the landscape in Raya and the Last Dragon. But the 4 activities you've identified are disasters and flood, rivers and waterways, weather and rain, and then this landscape and building patterns. I was interested in, there's this element of disaster, but then there's also the importance of rain as well as a good force. And this is something which the film also bears out. So the river, when the Last Dragon dies, the river dries up.
Mostly like, for example, if the Naga that link to the rain and the weather, if the rain is too much, or like some year have so much rain and then sometimes it got flood, people always perceive that it's the Naga doing. Even like the calendar that produced every year, and then they will kind of quantify how much rain they will get for that year from the number of the Naga figures on the calendars. And then also they have certain terms that are certain description that talking about how the rain will come in first quarter or second quarter or something like that.
And there's a connection made between the dragons and perhaps their magic. I don't know if magic is the right term for that.
I would call ability.
I mean, that's the term they use in the movie, is that it's magic.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's magic, yeah.
I think magic, it just communicates to kids, right?
Yes. In terms of Buddhism itself, or even like, in local folklore, they always full of this miraculous story. For my Southeast Asian perspective, the miraculous story, it can be something simple like do kindness to people. For example, Naga helped the prince at that time, build a city. The local folklore said he would just build in one day. That is miraculous, right? So something like that.
Right. So that's the miraculous aspect is how quickly it happened.
Yeah.
So to your point about how like the miraculous can even just be something as being kind, in the film, Raya finds Sisu and then Sisu can take human form. And I thought that was really interesting because in the myth that you write about in your article, that Naga also takes human form.
Yeah.
And Sisu is constantly telling Raya to treat people with kindness.
Yeah.
And to be open.
Yeah.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to find the broken bits of the gem so that they can put the gem back together. And to find the broken bits of the gem, they need to go to the leaders of each of these regions. And Sisu is constantly telling Raya, bring a gift, come with kindness and openness and just ask. And Raya's like, no, you can't just ask. We have to have a plan where we break into the place and we find the gem and we take it.
Yeah.
And Sisu's always trying to reinforce a sort of social behavior or a cultural norm, trying to remind Raya of how to behave properly in society.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there is that link to what the idea of even kindness being the miraculous.
Yes. You can see it when we're talking about the permission, right? So when people build something or when they do something with the landscape, they need to offer. That is kind of like a gesture you need to have. You need to have something in order to get something back.
Right.
It's kind of like become our daily life. I interviewed the abbot and sometimes like the lay people came and then asked about something, but they always bring gift or either like some food or something like that to the monks or to the abbots in order to get something. So yeah. And then also in the part of like transfiguration, so in Raya, it's quite interesting that they show like Sisu can show themselves as a dragon at some time to people, but in Southeast Asia, they don't do that. Mostly Naga will be really private and reserved. So they will just transfigure as a human if they want to talk to humans. And then maybe later, the human will know that it's the Naga. They will tell or something like that. But maybe like it's also like play in the Raya case because it's just Raya, right? But now it's later, like I think they show, to everybody in the world, right? Because all of the Naga.
They do. Like at the end, all the dragons reemerge and they all fly across the sky and all the people see the dragons. Yeah, but the way that you're explaining it sounds similar to me to the way that God interacts with people in the Bible because, you don't see God. Moses sees a burning bush the first time he sees God, or when God wants to interact with people, he sends representatives.
So is there a reason why the Naga hide themselves from people and disguise themselves in human form?
Yeah.
I think because they try to protect themselves as well. Mm-hmm. If people believe they exist, right? Naga is not a creature that live in their own world. People believe that their world is underground or somewhere far away or even within the city itself. If you caught that in my article in Chengsan, they have one advert talking about the place that you can go or the place that the Naga came out from their world and then they can go down the way out and in. So I think for me, they don't want to expose to humans so much to protect themselves.
So is there this concept of the Naga being hidden, but at one point they maybe weren't? So from the sound of it is that they're keeping themselves hidden because people might hurt them or that there's something that could go wrong. But in Raya with the dragons, it's mostly part of the film narrative that the dragons were also turned to stone 500 years ago. And there's a belief in dragons, but there's also kind of a concept of, maybe they're not really real. And I was wondering whether this perhaps mapped onto a sense of the world back before was filled with creatures and entities and in the language of Raya and magic and all these other kind of things. And then now those things are slightly hidden. Is that the same with the Naga? Were they ever not hidden? Or have they always been perhaps underground and keeping themselves hidden from humans?
Like, does myth and folklore see a before time?
Yeah, I think it's similar. Like, for example, in a folklore about the Naga help the prince. I think before, from my understanding, is they might be easily show themselves to the good people. And then, that time doesn't have many people like now.
Right.
So mostly before Hinduism, Buddhism came to the world region, they roam the areas and then interact with people. But also it's interesting point that you mentioned people, even in today, like in Southeast Asian society, some people believe that Nagas still exist. Naga is real. So sometimes they try to find them. There's so many festivals, so many ritual ceremony for, worshipping the Naga along the river, especially Mekong River that links so many countries. So in Chengsan itself, located on the bank of that river as well. So this river is very important because so many versions and so many stories about the Naga along the river from Myanmar down to Cambodia.
So this was something that was perhaps in Raya, and I don't know if this is the case in Naga belief. But are the Naga embodied by the river, or is this where they just might be sometimes? Because the whole of the land of Kumandra in Raya is the river is the shape of the dragon, and it's like there is an embodiment of the dragon in the landscape and in the people themselves. They're all kind of part of this unified concept.
I actually thought that your term, Piyawit, that you employ in your article, mythscape, works really well for describing the landscape picture of Kumandra in the movie, because it is almost like a literal mythscape, the fact that the river is the shape of a dragon and then they're all living along that.
Yeah, people believe that the waterways and the river is representing the Naga activity through the landscape. So when they move past the landscape, they will create the river and the stream. That's why I think about using the term mythscape, because people see the landscape through myth, through the folklore, through the story.
Right.
Should we talk a little bit about Chosen One and perhaps what Raya is doing in this? So Katie and I have kind of settled on a number of ideas about how the Chosen One as an idea is conveyed in a lot of Western films. And Raya does something quite interesting with it, because I think between us we've identified perhaps 3 Chosen Ones in Raya. And it progresses as you go throughout the film, and initially Raya seems to be a chosen one, like she's the protagonist, she's very centered in the narrative. It's about her mission to get her father back, but then also there's this restoring the world back to this harmony and all these other ideas that are played around. And then Sisu the dragon also is a chosen one. She's the last one. She's kind of essentially worshipped because she has saved humanity from the Drew. And then...
But she's also been chosen by her siblings who give her the responsibility of being the last dragon to banish the Droon. So there's that aspect. And she talks about how having that moment where she is chosen by her siblings gave her the strength to be able to complete that task.
Which then comes on to Namari, who ultimately seems to be the third of these chosen one figures, and it is the group, the representatives of all these other kingdoms, placing their trust in her that allows her to be the chosen one.
Namari is our antagonist. She is like the main foil for Raya, but at the end, in the way that Sisu had all of her siblings put faith in her and she's able to banish the Droon, the team that Raya has sort of assembled from the regions, they put their faith in Namari and she banishes the Droon.
So is this compelling? Is this a compelling choice for Chosen One from your perspective?
I think like the pattern of Chosen One has become like a Western perspective. So for us, it's just basically responsibilities that pass down from generation to generation. Mm-hmm. The Chosen One might be in the context and the circumstances that they might find along the way of life. For me, like in Southeast Asian cultures, the Chosen One is always like tied to elite group. If you learn about history, many manuscripts have this person have a lot of the terms like destiny or something like that coming from your past life, because, you know, Buddhism play an important role as well. So like the past life, you did a lot of good deeds, and then this life kind of like have this ability, or let's call magic, something like that. When you talk to people, people believe you, something like that. So that is also like one of the characters of the Chosen One, that if you want to say in Southeast Asian culture.
And it's also something that you've come to, so from a past life, that living a very good past life has put you into that position then to carry out some kind of really important task.
Yeah. Sorry, I need to mention this book. It's Joseph Campbell, you know.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Hero of a Thousand Faces.
Because of the ideal that, you know, many myths and many folklores and many kind of cultures in the Western culture, like we need to get through this kind of ordeals and Chosen One or something like that. But in Southeast Asia, it's quite different because we have a lot of multicultural settings. So the pattern of family, it's kind of, it depends on the cultures. And then also like mostly because of that, one thing that I need to mention is we learn history through the mainstream history. We've been teach the same thing maybe in the Western, you know, maybe in England, you know, through like this king does this, that queen does that. And then we don't talk about the normal people life so much. And one thing that Raya that did a good job, and also at the same time did a bad job, that they try to represent people, but people still tied to this kind of entity or like titles or like, you know, elite groups or something like that.
Oh, it's because they're sticking to the standard Disney format of having a Disney princess. And so we have Raya and then Namari, who are both very much positioned as princesses.
Yeah.
And so, so it is elite. And then the person who joins from Spine, he's also an elite figure, and it's only the children, the one from Tail and the one from Talon, who are not elite.
And that's kind of like when it's introduced, that two characters, they represented quite well about the region as well, you know, like the boat trip. But also like, I wouldn't say like we don't have a Chosen One, we may have, but it might not be like really kind of need to be like really big to need to save like the whole world or something, like maybe like just basically you need to save your family or something like that, or some certain religious need and then you need to go and get it and something like that. Not like the whole thing that you need to like go fight the dragon, rescue the princess, like, you know, the Western folklore.
So the stories focus on things that are a bit smaller.
Yeah.
But not necessarily less important, just smaller.
Yeah. That's what I was going to come to, which I think is really helpful for this. So understanding this as a Disney product, essentially, but it's mediating lots of elements of Southeast Asian culture.
I was excited though.
Yeah?
I was excited, but when I watch it, I kind of feel like not so much that maybe I expect too much or expect more, something like that. So I was excited when Raya came, and then when I watch it, I feel like, okay, yeah, it's good to see something, but it's not like, ooh, like kind of happy.
I think that is the feeling expressed in so many articles that I read about this, written by people coming from Southeast Asian backgrounds or from Southeast Asia themselves. There was one particularly really good article, and we will link to that as well as a few others on our website, that was in Cinema, which is Singapore and Asian film news. And that expressed very much the same thing, like really excited to see this movie, how exciting to get Southeast Asian representation in the West, but ultimately what it boiled down to was a collection of Easter eggs. So there were lots of fun things that you could look to, but culture and identity isn't formed by a collection of Easter eggs. But I thought maybe we could actually talk a little bit about some of the fun bits of representation. They talked about different fighting styles being represented. Raya carries arnis sticks, which are a Filipino martial art item. The kris, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, which is a curved Indonesian blade. And so we see that represented as well. Muay Thai fighting style, which is used in Fang. Fang itself is inspired by Angkor Wat from Cambodia. And also the white and gold, they're pulling from Thai temples. The floating marketplace that we see in Talon is really common both to Vietnam and Thailand. And one thing that I noticed, and I was really excited to notice this being a textile and material culture nerd, was there was a really quick moment in the beginning of the movie when they're in Hart, which is where Raya and her father are from. And there's a woman in a room and she's doing batik dyeing on a textile. And she actually has the tool that you basically drop hot wax onto a textile to create designs, and then you dye the textile and the wax comes off, and then that leaves the space where the design has been created. And I've tried doing it myself in a textile course, and it's so difficult. But that was a fun little thing to see. And Raya's animal friend, who I can only imagine is like a woodlouse, but really big, is named Tuk Tuk, and then she actually rides Tuk Tuk around later. The things like this. And there's a lot of food, jackfruit and durian. I think a lot of people found a lot of joy in a lot of the food references.
Yeah.
There is that dish that is meant to represent the coming together of all the five kingdoms. Has that a real-world counterpart?
Yeah, tom yum in Thai, tom yum soup or something like that, because they put lemongrass and chili peppers in there. But the myths, like, we eat a lot of rice, so they don't see rice so much in Raya.
Other than kanji.
Yeah.
Because the little boy whose name I forget, he has a boat, which is a restaurant, and he serves shrimp kanji.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also, like, you see a lot of scene in the landscape, but I haven't seen the rice paddy field. I'm thinking a little bit that they don't show people working on the rice paddy field, because Southeast Asia is a huge area that, people growing rice, and it's become kind of prominent scene in Bali, in Thailand, in Vietnam, and in Cambodia as well. I don't know that Raya did show that.
I don't think that they did. No, I don't think that featured much at all. I mean, yeah. And now that I'm thinking about it, actually, because the dragons are tied to the presence of water and there's the absence of the dragons. And when she finally locates Sisu, it's at the very end of Tail, and it's all dry, arid landscape. And we see her going along the river, and the river is like a really dry riverbed with a teeny bit of little stream left in it. And I'm wondering, maybe in the imaginary land of the creators of the movie, at one point that was a river that was full and a lush landscape, and this is supposed to be dry because of the absence of all the dragons.
Well, we have a drought too in Southeast Asia, so I think it can reflect a little bit when the dry season came. And it's happening from time to time in many rivers in Southeast Asia. So I think I like the ideas that they said, like, when the Naga is gone, it's no water.
Right.
I kind of like that because, like, representing a little bit like the relationship between humanity and the Naga, or the mystical serpent, that is really important to them.
Other than having these check boxes that I sort of ran through all these different things that were nice little visual representations, nice little Easter eggs of Southeast Asian culture. To get that depth of representation, what would you have liked to see so that you actually came out of the movie feeling satisfied?
And maybe for food to think about, would this be a change to the plot? Would this be a change to maybe the specificity of some of the characters and kingdoms?
I think like the one that I said, like, I want to see more community. I want to see more community, local people, and then also we mentioned a little bit about rice paddy fields. So I want to see the scene that maybe like Raya and her father walking around the paddy fields and her father talking about like how this is important to community, and then this is life sources, and also like, you know, how the dragon help and the water came. They have rain, but they don't mention like how important the dragon is.
Right.
Not just showing like it's a lot of water, but in terms of like cosmological concepts. I'm also like working on my postdoc project if I finish my PhD.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. Good luck.
On like aquatic cosmology, because people tend to ditch out the waterscape. Mostly like, you know, when you're talking about cosmology, it's going to be the mountains. Because according to Hinduism and Buddhism, also I don't know about Christianity, people pay attention to the large monuments in the land, but they don't talk about like how water is important, body of water is important to like people's life, especially in Southeast Asia. Yeah.
I think this is a really key thing because particularly in Western anthropology of religion, I think Rudolf Otto, Mircea Eliade, both of their books really talk about the mountains as really, really significant things.
Yeah.
But then it's often so much water rituals or associations with bodies of water become really, really significant in lots and lots of religions around the world.
You can see like a little bit of similar to the ideas of the Naga. Naga is representing water, the whole body of water, and it rains and everything, right? So I see like from the Western perspective, the changing since Christianity, because before like in Greek, we have Poseidon, right? So like other polytheistic religions, they also have representation of the water god. That's why, like, you know, my postdoc, I want to just bring waterscape back to Southeast Asia. Not just Mount Meru or not just the large structure of, like, really beautiful monument or temple, but the water. In my article talking about why the Naga is really important, because they built the temple really close to the water or the place that the Naga reside, something like that.
So I'm thinking, because you referenced Tim Ingold's work, and he talks a lot about environment, but particularly landscape and what that means in human social perception, I'm thinking waterscape as a way to think about that for your future project. And it's doing something quite different and reframing in terms of a Southeast Asian culture and the significance of water.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, they create body of water as well. Like in Cambodia, the whole city of Angkor Thom, like the whole Angkor area, even in the last structure, like Angkor Wat. So they build like the huge Rai in the east and the west. So they create like the man-made water because body of water is important to the cosmology as well.
They mention that in Raya as well, actually, when they talk about Fang, which is very obviously inspired by Angkor Wat. They actually say that it's a constructed body of water created through a dam. It's one of the lines in the movie.
And it keeps them safe as well.
Yeah, it's about safety.
Yeah, because at the beginning, where Hart is keeping the gem, that is around pools of water as well. And there's something about how they're touching the water. I think when they come in to actually steal the gem at the very beginning, there's something about them touching the water and everything goes wrong. Yeah. So, there's so much going on.
But also, like, don't forget that Angkor is based on Hinduism cosmology. So, also, like, in Chingshan, elder people that I interview, they don't like the way that people build a road over the waterways or build a dam, because they want the water to let the water, you know, flow naturally by themselves, and then they will benefit more than just building a dam.
They're correct.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what both of your thoughts were on the Droon, because I kind of struggle with their meaning. They talk a little bit about them being the dragons are water and the Droon are kind of fire, and that's where they turn everything to stone. But I struggled to understand them, let's say, and I don't know if you two had any thoughts about what their meaning is, or perhaps if they represent anything?
In Southeast Asian context, maybe compared to like a bad spirit or a bad luck or bad circumstances that happen to people.
I think reading your article helped me think about it a little bit more because of this idea that the Naga are responsible both for what is good, but also what is bad. And that's ultimately dependent on the behavior of people. Mm-hmm. So people behave in a positive way, they get something positive out of it. Mm-hmm. They behave in a negative way, and there is a punishment associated. Mm-hmm. And there's this line in the movie where Sisu explains that the Droon are effectively people. People make the Droon.
Yeah.
And so even though in Raya and the Last Dragon, it's not the dragons themselves that are responding to the bad behavior of people with punishment.
Yeah.
There is still this vocalized connection between, well, it's your behavior that's causing the Droon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it made me think about when Raya found Sisu and how, landscape reflect the people who live within the landscape as well. So in Southeast Asian contexts, some places just drought, but other places might be foliage. So the Naga might move somewhere, or if something happened because of, people did something to offend them, or like if you don't taking care of your landscape, the Naga will leave, and then everything will look like, dead and dried and less water, But if you did good, everything around like foliage and something, or green or something like that. So when the Naga came back, they might help bring life back, something like that. That's what I see from Southeast Asian perspective.
I was thinking about how Kumandra ultimately in the movie is an expression of a utopian ideal. They talk about Kumandra as being the opposite of a place where there are borders and division and different kingdoms. Mm-hmm. So Kumandra would be the absence of borders, everybody coming together, the world reuniting in a sense of harmony. So it feels like a utopian ideal. And I'm wondering if there is some sort of utopian ideal in that way in Southeast Asian thought.
Yeah, I believe Kumandra might, for me, like it's representing, it's not a modern world of Southeast Asia, mostly in maybe 14th, 15th century during that time. It's represented a little bit because we don't have border, so we have kingdoms, we have states, but also like mostly people pay attention to the center, not periphery. So periphery is more like community, and then people between these two kingdoms, they communicate, but most of the time they share resources and sometimes they help each other if like the bigger threat outside, like for example Mongol or something like that came, so they come together and then help protecting the region. In Southeast Asian cultures, border is not really like permanent line, so it can move around. This kind of center depends on like how powerful each kingdom are. So I can see a little bit the idea of utopia represented okay well, like that they came together as just a neighbor. Like, like Thailand, Laos, even though like we have a lot of problems in the real history.
Mm-hmm. But people look back on that time period with a sort of utopian nostalgia.
Yeah.
Right.
Something like that. So kind of like maybe fantasize a little bit, but try to create like a really harmonious, beautiful Southeast Asian community that they have a lot of kingdom, but also like in real life and like every other places, it's not like that, right? They come together sometimes. So people tend to think about like we have to have a leader. We have to have one leader. That's why I try to argue in my dissertation. Hierarchy is everywhere. They have hierarchical system, of course, but it's not always hierarchy. That's why I use the other term in terms of archaeology. It's called hierarchy. Other people have more power. Other people have this resources, other people have these types of resources shared between these group of people. So one leader can stay long or something like that, or one kingdom is up and down. It's natural.
But would the Naga then fit into that heterarchy sense of to build something like a temple or something like that, you ask for their permission, and then there is another figure who mediates that in some way by being a specialist, so that the interacting with the landscape and beliefs about it also function in this kind of layered system?
Good question. I see the Naga is not part of hierarchy. Mm-hmm. But when Buddhism was introduced or Hinduism was introduced, this Naga put in a kind of stratified relationship with other elements or other entities. So I think for me, I try to argue in that the Naga give people space in terms of like when Buddhism can't explain the thing to them, but the Naga can. Mm-hmm. Naga will help to understand and keep the social space that Buddhism or even like the mainstream Buddhism can't explain to the local community. So I see the Naga as hierarchy, in terms of like mainstream Buddhism is maybe in the regions, maybe hierarchy, because, the king has to be the top and then come down to then normal people, right? But Naga is everywhere. They have so many versions, they have so many narratives, they have stories. It depends on the region. So I think it's kind of give people get space when people couldn't even go to the temple and talking about their own personal problem because maybe like the normal mainstream Buddhism or doctrine can't explain. So like the belief of the Naga or spirits might give them more space to like understand and something like that.
Piyawit, it's been so great having you with us today, but before we let you go, we'd love for you to pitch us a pairing. This can be anything at all that you would pair with Raya and the Last Dragon. Maybe a drink, a food, another movie, a book, an article, a piece of music. The sky's the limit.
So I think for Raya, I imagine like any boat trip in Southeast Asian river, so any country, so you can go like take a long boat trips in Mekong River. You can see exactly the same, kind of scene that you see from the movie, and the floating market or something like that. And then you can see like how culture like sprung out along the river, and you can see like how lively people can be along the river as well. Also, like think about either Mai Tai or Singapore Sling. Like the cocktail.
Singapore Sling, I haven't heard anyone recommend that in so long, but that is a good drink. That's a really, really good drink.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's not for kids, though. That's not a kid's pairing.
Yes. No. I think the boat trip it's really nice.
And a Mai Tai.
Yeah, a boat trip and a Mai Tai or a Singapore Sling. Yeah.
Sounds brilliant.
That sounds good.
I really like that.
This was great, Piyawit. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Hopefully I give you some version of my knowledge, so don't take my word for it for all of them. So please consult.
That's fine.
Well, thank you for sharing your research with us.
You're welcome.
We really appreciated it. That's our show today. Gods and Movie Makers is researched and produced by us, Joe Scales and Katie Turner, and supported by listeners like you. Our music is by Style to Kid. As always, you can follow us at GodMovPod on Twitter and Instagram. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, head on over to our website, godsandmoviemakers.com, where you can donate to us or subscribe for additional content. Thanks for listening.